The metallic taste of fear hung in the air across every battlefield of World War II, mingling with cordite smoke and the desperate prayers of young men far from home. In the chaos of combat, where bullets carved through flesh and steel with equal indifference, something remarkable was happening in the pockets of American soldiers, something that would remain largely unknown to their German adversaries throughout the entire war. Small metal-clad books, no larger than a pack of cigarettes, were performing miracles of physics and faith, stopping bullets that should have killed the men who carried them. These were not ordinary books. They were New Testament Bibles, specifically designed and distributed to millions of American servicemen, and their story reveals layers of military psychology, religious devotion, industrial innovation, and the strange arithmetic of survival that defined the greatest conflict in human history. To understand why German soldiers never knew about these bullet-stopping Bibles found on dead American GIs, we must first understand the profound difference in how the two militaries approached the spiritual welfare of their troops. The American military tradition, rooted in a nation built substantially on Protestant Christianity and religious freedom, had always maintained a robust chaplain corps and encouraged personal faith as a source of strength and moral fortitude. This was not mere lip service. The United States Army, Navy, Marine Corps, and Army Air Forces maintained thousands of chaplains representing dozens of denominations, and these men of God were integrated into combat units at every level. They held services under fire, administered last rites in foxholes, and counseled terrified young men who had seen things no human should witness. But beyond the chaplains, there was a concerted effort by both military authorities and civilian religious organizations to place Scripture directly into the hands of every soldier, creating what amounted to a portable chapel that each man could carry into battle. The most common of these spiritual talismans was the Armed Forces New Testament, a specially designed pocket edition that became as ubiquitous as dog tags among American troops. These Bibles were not like the heavy leather-bound family Bibles sitting on coffee tables back home. They were engineered for war. The American Bible Society, along with other religious organizations like the Gideon's International Publishing Houses, produced millions upon millions of these compact New Testaments, starting well before America's entry into the war. The dimensions were carefully calculated. The book measured approximately 3.5 inches by 5 inches, small enough to fit comfortably in a breast pocket of a military uniform, positioned directly over the heart. The binding was designed to be durable, meant to withstand the moisture of European winters, the dust of North African deserts, and the humid rot of Pacific jungles. Many editions featured metal covers, typically made of steel or aluminum, adding both weight and durability to the package. The metal covering was not originally intended as armor. This is a crucial point that reveals much about both intention and accident in wartime. The manufacturers added metal covers to protect the pages from the elements and the rough handling of military life. Soldiers lived in conditions that destroyed paper. They waded through rivers, crawled through mud, slept in rain-soaked trenches, and carried everything they owned on their backs through punishing physical ordeals. A paper Bible without protection would disintegrate within weeks. The metal covers, usually embossed with patriotic or religious imagery such as crosses, eagles, or shields, transformed these Bibles into something that could survive a war. What the manufacturers could not have fully anticipated, though some certainly hoped and prayed for, was that this protective covering would sometimes protect not just the sacred words inside, but the sacred life of the soldier carrying them. The physics of bullet stopping is more complex than popular imagination suggests. A bullet does not simply hit an object and either pass through or bounce off. What happens depends on an intricate interplay of factors, including the bullet's velocity, mass, and construction, the angle of impact, the distance traveled, the materials encountered, and whether those materials are single substances or layered composites. The metal-clad pocket Bibles created exactly such a composite structure. You had a steel or aluminum cover then compressed pages of relatively dense paper, sometimes several hundred pages thick, then another metal cover on the back. This created a layered defense that could, under the right circumstances, dissipate the kinetic energy of a bullet through progressive deformation and resistance. When a bullet strikes metal, that metal deforms, creating a crater and absorbing energy. If the bullet has lost velocity over distance, or if it strikes at an oblique angle rather than perpendicular, or if it is a pistol round rather than a high-velocity rifle bullet, the metal may absorb enough energy to significantly slow or even stop the projectile. The compressed paper pages behind that first metal layer then provide continued resistance. Paper, when densely packed, is remarkably effective at stopping bullets. This is why thick books have been known throughout history to occasionally save lives, and why paper is used in some types of body armor as backing material. The pages catch the deformed bullet, spreading its remaining energy across a wider area and bringing it to a halt through friction and compression. If the bullet makes it through all the pages, it must then penetrate the back metal cover, which provides one final layer of resistance. American soldiers began carrying these Bibles for reasons of faith, not ballistic protection. The distribution was massive and methodical. Before troops shipped overseas, chaplains and religious volunteers distributed New Testaments by the thousands. Families sent them to their sons and husbands. Churches included them in care packages. The Bibles came with inscriptions from mothers, with notes from pastors, with pressed flowers from sweethearts. They were tokens of home, reminders of the moral universe these young men were fighting to preserve. Many soldiers who carried them were genuinely devout, reading passages before battle or during quiet moments between the storms of combat. Others carried them as good luck charms, a common human impulse to hedge bets with the divine when facing mortality. Still others carried them simply because they were given one, and it seemed wrong to throw away a Bible, even if they rarely opened it. The motivation did not matter. What mattered was placement. Military uniforms of the era were designed with breast pockets, positioned high on the chest, and these pockets became the natural home for these small Bibles. Soldiers also carried letters, photographs, cigarettes, and other small personal items in these pockets, but the Bible often occupied the prime real estate directly over the heart. This was partly symbolic, the heart being the seat of faith and emotion, but it was also practical. The pocket was the right size, and keeping the Bible close to the chest meant it was less likely to be lost or damaged during the violent gymnastics of combat. The first documented cases of Bibles stopping bullets emerged early in the war, though the phenomenon almost certainly occurred during World War I as well. Soldiers would be hit, feel the impact, brace for death or terrible pain, and then discover they were alive and relatively unharmed. Upon investigation, they would find their pocket Bible deformed, the metal cover dented or torn, the pages shredded, and sometimes burned from the bullet's friction, but their skin intact. The bullet would be found lodged in the pages, or fallen into the lining of the jacket. These men became walking miracles, and they told their stories. The stories spread through the ranks like wildfire. In an environment where death was random and merciless, where you could be killed by a bullet fired by someone you never saw from a distance you could not imagine, the idea that something as small and common as a pocket Bible might save your life was profoundly comforting. It did not matter that the protection was inconsistent or that it depended on factors no soldier could control. What mattered was the possibility. Faith and superstition blurred together in the foxholes. Men who had never been particularly religious started carrying Bibles. Men who already carried them made sure they were positioned just right. Chaplains reported increased attendance at services, and letters home frequently mentioned the protective power of Scripture, both spiritual and physical. However, and this is the critical element of our story, these accounts remained largely within the American military community. The Bibles that stopped bullets were found on living soldiers who could tell their tales, or on dead soldiers whose bodies were recovered by their own comrades. When American medics or graves registration units processed casualties, they documented personal effects. They saw the damaged Bibles. They understood what had happened, or what had almost happened. These stories became part of unit lore, passed down from veteran to replacement, incorporated into the mythology that helped men process the incomprehensible violence surrounding them. But German soldiers encountered American dead under very different circumstances. When Wehrmacht infantry, SS troops, or Fallschirmjäger came across fallen American soldiers, they were typically in the midst of combat or its immediate aftermath. The tactical situation demanded speed and caution. German soldiers searching American bodies were looking for intelligence, weapons, ammunition, food, medical supplies, and valuable personal items. They were not conducting forensic examinations. A small, damaged book in a breast pocket of a corpse would be at best a curiosity briefly examined and discarded, at worst, completely overlooked in the rush of battlefield salvage. Moreover, even when German soldiers did find these Bibles, the significance would not have been immediately apparent. A Bible with a dented metal cover and damaged pages could result from many causes. It could have been stepped on, crushed by equipment, or damaged by shrapnel, rather than a direct bullet hit. Without the living testimony of the soldier who had been saved, without the context of that moment when the bullet struck and the man realized what had happened, the Bible was just another ruined possession of a dead enemy. The forensic evidence that would clearly indicate a bullet strike, such as the distinctive cratering of metal, the specific pattern of page damage, or the bullet itself lodged in the pages, required closer examination than was practical or safe in combat conditions. Furthermore, the German military culture approached religion and spiritual matters quite differently than the Americans. While the Wehrmacht certainly had military chaplains, and many German soldiers were Christian, both Catholic and Protestant, the institutional emphasis on personal piety was less pronounced. The Nazi regime had a complex and often hostile relationship with organized Christianity, promoting instead a vague form of Germanic spiritualism and absolute loyalty to the Führer. Many German soldiers carried religious items, certainly, including crucifixes, rosaries, and prayer books, but there was not the same systematic distribution of pocket scriptures that characterized the American effort. A German soldier finding a small Bible on an American corpse might view it simply as evidence of American religiosity, not as a piece of defensive equipment. The language barrier also played a role. Most German soldiers could not read English with any fluency. The Bibles found on American dead were English-language New Testaments. A German soldier opening such a book would see incomprehensible text. Even if they understood the book was religious in nature, they could not read the inscriptions from family members, could not understand any notes the soldier might have written in the margins, could not access the personal meaning the book held. It was just a damaged English book, hardly worth carrying away, when German soldiers had their own heavy loads and their own concerns about survival. There was also the matter of military intelligence and propaganda. Both sides in World War II engaged in extensive analysis of enemy equipment, tactics, and morale. German intelligence officers certainly interrogated American prisoners and analyzed captured documents and equipment. However, the idea that American soldiers were carrying Bibles that sometimes stopped bullets was not the kind of tactical intelligence that would significantly affect German military planning or operations. It did not reveal American positions, strength, or intentions. It was a curiosity at best. If German intelligence officers did compile reports noting the prevalence of pocket Bibles among American troops, these reports would have been filed away as sociological observations rather than actionable military intelligence. From a propaganda perspective, the knowledge that American Bibles sometimes stopped bullets could have been exploited by either side, but neither did so effectively. German propaganda, particularly that directed at the home front and at occupied populations, often portrayed Americans as materialistic, decadent, and godless, corrupted by Judaism and capitalism. The image of American soldiers carrying Bibles into battle and being protected by divine providence did not fit this narrative. It suggested that Americans were, in fact, people of faith, and that God might be on their side, neither of which were messages the Nazi propaganda machine wanted to promote. Better to simply not mention it. American propaganda, conversely, did occasionally reference the protective power of pocket Bibles, but usually in the context of individual human interest stories, rather than systematic reporting. A newspaper might run a story about a local boy saved by his Bible, complete with photographs of the damaged book and a thankful interview with his mother. These stories boosted morale and encouraged religious devotion, both at home and among the troops. However, there was no coordinated campaign to promote the phenomenon. Perhaps because military authorities did not want soldiers relying on Bibles instead of proper cover and armor, or perhaps because the stories were seen as too anecdotal and too dependent on divine favor to be useful as propaganda. The question of how often Bibles actually stopped bullets is impossible to answer with statistical precision. The plural of anecdote is not data, and wartime record-keeping did not include systematic documentation of Bible-related bullet stops. We know it happened because we have photographs of damaged Bibles, first-hand accounts from survivors, and letters written home describing the phenomenon. We know it happened because multiple independent sources from different units, different theaters of war, and different years of the conflict report the same basic story, but we do not know if it happened dozens of times or thousands of times. We do not know what percentage of soldiers carrying pocket Bibles were saved by them. We do not know how many bullets the Bibles failed to stop, resulting in deaths where the Bible was simply one more personal effect on a corpse. What we can say with confidence is that the phenomenon was real, that it was known within the American military, and that it remained largely unknown to the enemy. This asymmetry of knowledge is itself historically significant. War is often decided by information, by who knows what and when they know it. But this was information without clear military value, a curiosity that highlighted the strange intersection of industrial design, religious practice, and the chaotic randomness of combat. The stories of Bible-saved soldiers often followed a similar narrative arc. The soldier would be advancing, defending, or moving through a combat zone. There would be enemy fire, often at medium range where bullets had lost some initial velocity but still carried lethal force. The soldier would feel a sharp impact to the chest, powerful enough to knock him down or stagger him backward. The immediate sensation was of being shot, and the soldier's mind would race through the implications, expecting to see blood, expecting the pain to blossom, expecting to die, or at least be gravely wounded. But the pain would not come, or it would be limited to bruising from the impact rather than the tearing agony of a bullet wound. The soldier would reach into his pocket and withdraw the Bible, and there it would be. The evidence of salvation in the form of a deformed metal cover and shredded pages, sometimes with the bullet still embedded, sometimes with it having fallen away after being stopped. The psychological impact of this experience cannot be overstated. For the soldier involved, it was a miracle, pure and simple. Whether they attributed it to the hand of God, the prayers of family back home, or simple mechanical luck, the result was the same. They had been touched by death and survived through the intervention of this small book. Many of these men became intensely religious after such experiences, or deepened their existing faith. They wrote letters home describing what happened, often sending the damaged Bible back to their families as proof. These Bibles became cherished family heirlooms, physical evidence of divine protection or extraordinary fortune. For their comrades who witnessed these events or heard the accounts, the effect was also profound. In a combat environment where soldiers felt helpless against the random violence that could erase them at any moment, the Bible stories provided a sense of agency and hope. You could not control where the shells landed or where the bullets flew, but you could control whether you carried a Bible and where you kept it. This small act of preparation, This tiny hedge against oblivion was psychologically empowering. It gave men something to do, some small ritual of protection to perform. The metallic covers on these Bibles, whether steel or aluminum, made a significant difference in their protective capability. Steel, being harder and denser than aluminum, provided better protection, but added weight. Aluminum was lighter but softer, deforming more easily under impact. The thickness of the metal also varied between different editions and manufacturers. Some covers were quite thin, barely more than heavy foil, while others were substantial plates of metal that added noticeable weight to the package. The number of pages also varied, with some New Testaments including additional materials like Psalms and Proverbs, adding to the total thickness and therefore the protective capacity. The angle of impact was crucial. A bullet striking the Bible straight on, perpendicular to the cover, had to penetrate through the maximum thickness of material. A bullet striking at an angle might deflect off the curved metal surface or slice through at an oblique angle that effectively increased the distance it had to travel through the material. The curvature of the human chest also played a role, as the pocket Bible would conform somewhat to the body's shape, creating a slightly curved rather than flat target. Distance was perhaps the most important factor. At point-blank range, almost no rifle bullet of the era could be stopped by a pocket Bible. The kinetic energy was simply too great, and the bullet would punch through metal, paper, and body with barely any deceleration. At medium ranges, perhaps 50 to 200 yards, bullets had lost some velocity to air resistance, and had more opportunity to tumble or destabilize, making them more likely to be stopped or significantly slowed by the layered defense of the Bible. At long range, spent bullets or ricochets might be stopped even by less robust materials. The type of weapon mattered enormously. The standard German infantry rifle, the Karabiner 98K, fired a powerful 7.92x 57mm Mauser round at high velocity. This was a full-power rifle cartridge capable of penetrating substantial barriers. A direct hit from a 98K at close to medium range would likely penetrate a pocket Bible. However, submachine guns like the MP40 fired 9mm pistol ammunition, which while lethal, had much less penetrating power than rifle rounds. A 9mm round, especially at medium range or after losing velocity, was much more likely to be stopped by a metal-covered Bible. Similarly, pistol fire from officers or from soldiers in close-quarters combat would be less likely to penetrate than rifle fire. Shrapnel from artillery shells, grenades, and bombs presented a different ballistic challenge than bullets. Shrapnel fragments came in all shapes and sizes, with irregular velocities and tumbling flight paths. A pocket Bible would be more effective against smaller, slower fragments and less effective against large, fast fragments. However, the randomness of shrapnel meant that any protection, however limited, was better than none. The stories of saved soldiers occasionally reached German ears through interrogations of American prisoners or through intelligence intercepts of American communications. But these were isolated cases that did not create widespread awareness among German forces. Even when German intelligence became aware of the phenomenon, the information was not disseminated widely through the ranks. There was no tactical reason to do so, and in the vast machinery of total war, with millions of men fighting across multiple continents, a curiosity about enemy personal effects was hardly worth the effort of systematic communication. After battles, German soldiers would sometimes collect personal effects from American dead for various reasons. Some items had practical value, such as watches, lighters, knives, and food. Other items were kept as souvenirs, trophies of combat that soldiers might send home or keep as talismans of their own survival. Photographies, insignia, and documents might be collected for intelligence purposes or simply as curiosities. A damaged Bible might be picked up by a German soldier as a souvenir, perhaps to show people back home, or simply because it seemed interesting or valuable. But even in these cases, the German soldier might not understand that the damage to the Bible had been caused by a bullet that would otherwise have killed its owner. Without context, it was just a broken book. The cultural and religious context of both sides further explains the asymmetry of knowledge. American Protestantism, particularly the evangelical strains dominant in much of the country, emphasized personal Bible reading and the importance of Scripture in daily life. The idea of carrying a Bible into battle fit naturally with this religious worldview. American soldiers often wrote about reading their Bibles for comfort and guidance. The Bibles were not just protective talismans, but active tools of faith. German Catholicism and Protestantism, while certainly including Bible reading, tended to emphasize institutional religious practice and ritual more than personal scripture study. A German soldier was more likely to carry a rosary or a prayer card than a complete New Testament. This meant that when German soldiers encountered American Bibles, they were encountering a religious practice somewhat foreign to their own experience. The industrial capacity of America also played a role in the ubiquity of these Bibles. The United States had the manufacturing capability to produce millions of these specially made books and distribute them throughout a military force that eventually numbered over 12 million people. The logistics network that kept American forces supplied with ammunition, food, and equipment also delivered Bibles. This was possible only in a nation with both strong religious institutions and enormous industrial resources. Germany, increasingly strangled by Allied bombing and material shortages, could barely keep its soldiers supplied with essentials. The idea of mass-producing and distributing protective personal religious items was simply not practical. As the war progressed and American forces advanced deeper into German-held territory, more German soldiers encountered American equipment and personal effects. The sheer volume of American material was overwhelming. American soldiers were often better equipped, better fed, and more lavishly supplied than their German counterparts. This disparity was obvious to German soldiers who had the opportunity to examine American dead or captured American supplies. They saw chocolate bars, cigarettes, quality boots, advanced medical supplies, and sophisticated equipment. In this context, a pocket Bible was just one more item among many, noteworthy perhaps for its religious character, but not specially significant. The end of the war brought a flood of these stories to light, at least on the American side. Veterans came home and told their families about the Bibles that saved lives. Newspapers ran feature stories. Books were published collecting miracle stories from the war. The damaged Bibles were displayed in churches and museums. The American Bible Society used these accounts in their fundraising and promotional materials. The phenomenon became part of American World War II mythology, along with other stories of faith, courage, and providence under fire. German veterans, for their part, rarely if ever mentioned encountering these bullet-stopping Bibles. German wartime memoirs and post-war accounts focused on their own experiences of combat, hardship, and defeat. When they described encounters with American soldiers, living or dead, they focused on tactical details, the character of American fighting, and the overwhelming material superiority of American forces. A curiosity like Bible-stopped bullets simply did not register as significant or memorable in the larger narrative of their war experience. The reason German soldiers never knew about the Bibles found on dead American GIs that stopped bullets is ultimately a story about perspective, context, and the limitations of battlefield observation. From the German perspective, these Bibles were invisible, their significance unknowable, without the testimony of the saved soldiers. The physical evidence existed, but meaning requires interpretation, and interpretation requires context that German soldiers did not possess. They saw effects but not causes, objects but not stories, data but not information. In this way, the bullet-stopping Bibles became a secret, hidden in plain sight, a phenomenon real and significant within the American military but unknown to the enemy, a small mystery within the greatest conflict humanity has ever known.